Before we dive into the story, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe if you love tales where humanity proves why we're the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. Now let's begin. The jungle of Vornis, 9 never slept. It breathed, every leaf, every ripple of air alive with the faint hiss of something waiting to kill. Captain Rourke Hale pushed through the vines with his rifle raised, visor glowing against the green gloom. His HUD pinged faint heat signatures ahead, most of them small, animal life, but one burned brighter, deeper in the ruins. Another buried reactor core maybe? Another payday. Rourke didn't believe in luck, only in getting paid and not dying. The Syndicate salvage jobs had rules: scan, tag, extract. But no one mentioned that Vornis 9 still howled with the ghosts of its last war. Behind him, his squad trudged through the mud, 5 mercenaries in mismatched armor. Their chatter crackled over comms. "Commander says wrap it up before nightfall," Grant muttered. "Atmospheric sensors drop after dark." "Yeah," Rourke replied. "I've seen what hunts at night here." He meant it. He'd seen men vanish between blinks, dragged off by things with too many eyes. They reached the ruin, a collapsed fortress swallowed by jungle. Blackstone towers jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Rourke's scanner pulsed again. A heat pocket below ground. Large. Alive. He motioned the others to spread out. Stay sharp. Could be unstable power cells. He climbed down a slope where roots gripped the walls like veins. The smell hit him first, scorched metal and blood. Then he saw it, a massive den torn open by bombardment. Inside something moved. Rourke crouched low, rifle steady. His visor adjusted, revealing a creature pinned beneath rubble. A reptilian lion hybrid, scales glinting faint gold beneath ash. It let out a whimper, a sound so raw it hit him like a punch. The thing was small, young but unmistakably dangerous. "Command, I've got a live specimen," he whispered. "Dravicthar juvenile, maybe a month old." Static buzzed, then the reply came, cold and clipped. "Confirm and eliminate. We don't leave predators breathing, Hale." He hesitated. The cub shifted weakly, struggling to breathe. One wing, the size of a human arm, hung broken. Rourke adjusted his grip on the rifle. He could end it in one shot. The logical choice. Orders said burn it, bury it, move on. He'd followed plenty of those before. But something about the creature stopped him, the way it stared, unblinking, terrified but proud. A memory slipped through the cracks of his armor. A human colony burning on Helios Prime, a child trapped beneath debris, the way she looked at him before he pulled her free. He remembered her tiny hand gripping his wrist, the promise he made, to always pull someone out if he could. "Damn it," he muttered. He slung his rifle, dropped to his knees and began clearing rubble. Each piece weighed more than a crate of ammo. The cub let out a low rumble but didn't strike. It just watched him, eyes wide as a dying sun. Over comms, Grant's voice barked. "Hale status." "False alarm," he lied. "Just reactor heat. Moving on." "Copy that. We're packing up." When the last stone rolled aside, the cub collapsed against his chest. Warm, heavy, trembling. Its heartbeat thudded like a drum. He pressed a med patch against a gash along its side, human nanogel bubbling across alien skin. "You're lucky I'm soft in the head," he said quietly. "Don't make me regret this." The forest answered with a distant thunder. Dropships. Syndicate patrols sweeping for contraband. His visor flashed red, he'd been pinged. Someone on his team had flagged his position. Rourke swore under his breath, lifting the cub in both arms. Of course they would. He ran, branches whipping his armor, boots sinking in swamp muck. Laser fire sliced through the trees behind him, scorching vines into ash. "Captain Hale," a voice roared over comms. "You're harboring a Class Omega predator. Drop it or you're done." Rourke ducked under a root arch, sprinting toward the thicker shadows. "Already done, Grant." He cut the channel. The cub squirmed weakly, pressing its snout against his chest. Rourke could feel its breath, hot and shallow. "Hang in there, kid." Gunships cut across the canopy, their spotlights burning through leaves. He dove into a ravine, rolled, and pressed against a rock wall. The light swept past. He waited, motionless, until the sound faded. Silence returned, almost. The jungle whispered again. He exhaled slowly and looked at the cub. It blinked up at him, faint glow shimmering in its eyes like molten gold. "Well," he said, "looks like we're both fugitives now." He climbed out of the ravine, heading deeper into the wild where even Syndicate drones feared to fly. Above, the sky boiled red from the dying sun. His armor systems flashed warnings: oxygen thinning, rations low. None of it mattered. He found a shallow cave by nightfall and set down the cub. It curled close to the fire he built, pupils narrowing as it studied the flames. Every so often, it made a low chuffing noise almost like a purr. Rourke leaned against the wall, exhausted. "You don't even know who saved you, do you?" he murmured. "You'd probably eat me if you were older." The cub gave a soft growl in reply and Rourke laughed once, a rough, broken sound he hadn't made in years. Outside something screamed. The jungle was alive again. He tightened his grip on the rifle, scanning the treeline, but nothing moved near the cave. Whatever prowled out there seemed to give this place a wide berth. Maybe it sensed the thing inside wasn't prey. Rourke sat back down, lowering his visor. "Sleep, little monster. Tomorrow we figure out how to not die." The cub's breathing slowed. The firelight flickered against the walls, painting human and predator alike in the same orange glow. Rourke looked out once more into the dark, at the lights of syndicate ships fading beyond the horizon. They'd call him rogue by dawn. They'd send hunters. But he didn't care. He'd made his choice. And somewhere in the night, the jungle answered with a sound that felt almost like approval. Days bled into one another beneath the choking canopy of Vornis 9. The rain came in sheets that hissed against Rourke's armor and vanished into steam before it touched the ground. Everything here wanted to eat or infect something else, and Rourke was running out of both ammunition and rations. He'd learned quickly that this world respected only two things, adaptation and audacity, and humans as always were best at both. The cub grew faster than he'd expected. It had doubled in size within a week, muscles coiling under scaled skin that shimmered between bronze and charcoal. Rourke had started calling it Kale, not out of sentiment but because shouting, "Hey monster," in the jungle drew the wrong kind of attention. Kale responded to the name with a low rumble, almost pleased as if understanding the sound belonged to him now. Their days settled into a rhythm. Rourke scavenged old wrecks for power cells and nutrient gel while Kale stalked smaller predators, returning proudly with the remains of some reptilian nightmare for them to share. Rourke still cooked his food over fire. Kale preferred his raw, blood still hot. Yet somehow the two coexisted. The soldier and the beast. Trust was a fragile thing out here. One mistake, one misread movement, and the alliance would end with teeth and blood. But the cub never turned on him. Instead, it watched him constantly, curious, learning. When Rourke disassembled his rifle to clean it, Kale mimicked the motion with sticks, tapping each one into the mud in the same order. When he built a lean-to from scavenged tarp, Kale dragged logs closer to fortify it. The intelligence behind those molten eyes was undeniable and unsettling. At night, when the jungle screamed and the air stank of predators, Kale lay near the cave mouth, tail twitching in rhythm with Rourke's breathing. The sound of that steady rumble, half purr, half growl, became the only lullaby that kept the human mercenary from remembering the faces of men he'd lost in wars that no one bothered to finish. He spoke aloud sometimes to fill the silence. "You know," he told Kale one evening, poking the fire with a blade of scrap metal, "the syndicate calls your kind extinction grade." Said a full-grown Dravik, "Thar once ripped a cruiser out of the sky bare-handed." He glanced at Kale. The cub's head tilted, unblinking. "And here I am talking to one like a damn camp counselor." Kale huffed softly, smoke curling from his nostrils. Rourke chuckled. Yeah, laugh it up." Still, the soldier couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. Too many nights his motion sensors caught phantom readings. Shapes moving just beyond the range of his optics. He told himself it was nothing. The planet was a hive of movement, but part of him knew better. Something was tracking them. Food ran low by the 10th day. Rourke set snares while Kale prowled higher ground. He found himself relying on the cub's instincts more than his own gear. Kale could sense approaching storms hours before they broke, could smell danger long before it reached them. When Rourke once stepped toward a patch of moss, Kale growled sharply. A second later, the ground dissolved, revealing a pool of acid slimes writhing below. Rourke stared into the bubbling pit and gave a low whistle. "Remind me never to ignore you again." Kale blinked, then leaned forward, brushing his snout against Rourke's chest. The gesture was simple, but the meaning wasn't lost. It was trust. Maybe even gratitude. That night, thunder rolled across the jungle like the growl of gods. Rourke and Kale huddled beneath the cliffside shelter, rain battering the rocks. Lightning split the horizon, and for an instant Rourke saw the silhouette of something massive in the distance. Wings, claws, and eyes that glowed like molten glass. The shape vanished as quickly as it came, but his pulse refused to slow. Kale stirred restlessly, pacing near the cave entrance, nose twitching. Rourke rested a hand on his rifle. "Easy, kid. Probably just another storm beast." But Kale's eyes told him otherwise. They burned with recognition. The storm lasted until dawn. When the first light bled through the canopy, the jungle looked freshly forged, steaming and raw. Rourke moved cautiously through the undergrowth, scanning for tracks. Kale followed silently, head low, muscles tense. Then they found it, prints the size of Rourke's torso, pressed deep into the mud. The same species as Kale. Adult. Fresh. The edges still glistened with rainwater. He crouched beside one, tracing the outline with his glove. "So that's what you were smelling," he murmured. "Family." Kale gave a low, uncertain sound. His tail flicked, and for the first time, Rourke saw fear in the young predator's body language. Whatever had left those prints wasn't simply apparent. It was something Kale both recognized and dreaded. The soldier straightened, eyes narrowing. "Then we've got company." They retreated to the cave, gathering what little supplies they had. Rourke's mind ran calculations automatically. If adults were nearby, his chances of surviving another encounter dropped to near zero. The syndicate had ordered full extermination of Dravicthar dens for a reason. One adult could level a city block. Two could erase a continent. Still, as he looked at Kale, now too large to carry, his claws gleaming like forged blades, he felt no regret. He'd saved a life, and for once that felt like enough. By evening, the jungle grew unnaturally quiet. No insects. No wind. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Rourke felt it first, a vibration through the soles of his boots. Then came the sound, distant yet bone-deep, a roar that didn't echo so much as command the world to listen. Kale froze. Then he answered. The cub's roar was smaller, weaker, but the call carried through the trees, a trembling, defiant sound. Rourke's stomach tightened. He knew that call wasn't just an answer, it was a signal. The ground trembled again. Leaves shook from the trees as another roar shattered the silence, closer this time, so powerful it rattled the bones in his chest. Rourke stepped forward, gripping his weapon, though he knew it would make no difference. Through the trees' movement. The light dimmed as a shadow passed overhead. Massive, deliberate, alive. Rourke glimpsed scales, wings spanning 20 meters, eyes like burning coals cutting through the gloom. Kale stepped out from behind him, head raised, trembling but unyielding. Rourke's finger hovered near the trigger, though he knew firing would be suicide. His instincts screamed to run, but his conscience anchored him in place. He'd come too far to hand the cub over to fate now. The great creature landed with a sound like thunder, earth cracking beneath its weight. Its gaze fell on Rourke, then on Kale, then back again. Recognition flared, a spark of understanding older than language itself. Rourke's visor flickered from the energy discharge. He could feel the thing's presence like gravity pressing on his chest. Kale whimpered softly, taking a hesitant step forward. "Go on," Rourke whispered, voice barely audible. "If that's your kin, it's all right." Kale moved closer, tail low, chirping, a softer sound this time, one Rourke hadn't heard before. The massive creature lowered its head, exhaling a gust of hot air that rippled Rourke's armor. The sound it made wasn't anger. It was grief. Rourke's breath caught. He realized the truth then, the adult wasn't hunting. It was mourning. It had followed the scent of its lost offspring across the dead world, expecting a corpse, and found instead a human standing guard beside the living. For a moment the jungle stood still. Predator and man each assessing the other. Then, with a low rumble that shook the leaves from the trees, the adult creature turned its gaze fully on Rourke. He didn't move. Didn't raise his weapon. Only stared back. And when the beast finally spoke, not in words but in a slow, resonant growl that carried weight beyond translation, Rourke understood the meaning as clearly as if it had been carved into his mind. "You protected my blood." The sound faded into the wind, and the air filled again with the hum of the forest. Rourke exhaled, his hands shaking. Kale pressed against his leg, unafraid now, eyes bright. Somewhere above, the sky rumbled with approaching engines. Syndicate ships. Hunters. Rourke looked up at the darkening clouds and murmured, "Looks like the next war's already coming." Kale growled low as if agreeing. And from the treeline, the massive creature lifted its head and answered with a roar that made the entire world listen. The jungle was no longer silent. It pulsed with tension, as if every living thing sensed the impossible alliance forming beneath its canopy. Rourke stood between two forces that should never have shared the same air, a man with a rifle and a creature built to end civilizations. The adult Dravik, a massive, scarred, its armor like hide gleaming with bioluminescent veins, towered above him, wings folded like walls of shadow. Kale stood beside Rourke, trembling but proud, caught between species and loyalty. For several seconds neither moved. Rourke's weapon hung low, not from cowardice but calculation. Every survival instinct screamed to back away, yet something in the creature's gaze held him. It wasn't rage. It was recognition. The giant's nostrils flared, scenting the air between them. When it exhaled, the breath was hot and heavy with ozone, like the calm before a storm. Cale chuffed once, stepped forward, and brushed against the larger beast's leg. The response was immediate, a guttural sound that vibrated through the trees, a parental rumble of relief. Rourke let his rifle drop completely. The creature's eyes shifted to him, slitted pupils narrowing in thought. It could have crushed him in a heartbeat, but instead, it lowered its head until they were almost eye level. Its breath stirred his hair. Rourke swallowed, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "You're welcome," he said quietly. The Dravicthar blinked once, slow, deliberate. Then it turned slightly, exposing a wound across its flank, a deep gouge still seeping dark, metallic blood. Rourke recognized the pattern instantly: plasma fire. Syndicate grade. His gut twisted. They'd already been here. "They hunted you too," he murmured. The creature rumbled in response, a sound that seemed half confirmation, half warning. Rourke didn't need a translator to understand the message. The Syndicate hadn't given up. They were cleansing the entire sector, anything that proved too dangerous, or too valuable, to control. He moved closer, inspecting the injury. The wound glowed faintly around the edges, eating away at the flesh. He retrieved a canister of sealant foam and stepped forward slowly, showing it in his open palm. "This'll burn," he warned, "but it'll stop the bleeding." The creature didn't resist. When the foam hissed onto the wound, it snarled in pain but didn't strike. Rourke kept working, steady hands betraying no fear. Cale watched intently, tail flicking as if memorizing every motion. When it was done, Rourke stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "There," he said. "Good as it gets out here." For a long moment the forest was still. Then the great predator lowered its head again, pressing its forehead lightly against his chest plate. The gesture was brief, but the meaning was unmistakable. Acknowledgement. Respect. Rourke exhaled slowly. "You're welcome," he whispered again. A distant hum broke the quiet, mechanical, rising fast. Rourke turned toward the sound. Through the trees, flashes of light cut through the fog. Dropships. Syndicate insignias glowing on their hulls. He cursed under his breath. "They tracked my signal." The Dravicthar raised its head, tail lashing. Cale growled low, mirroring his parents' fury. Rourke tightened the straps on his armor, adrenaline burning away exhaustion. "If they find us, they'll bring firepower that makes this jungle look like a toy box," he said. "We need to move." But the creature didn't move. It stared toward the approaching threat, muscles rippling beneath its hide. Rourke realized what it intended a second too late. "No, don't." With a roar that cracked branches from the treetops, the Dravicthar launched skyward. The gust from its wings sent Rourke staggering. Lightning followed in its wake, not from the storm but from the beast itself. Plasma arcs danced along its scales as it tore through the clouds, vanishing into the rising dust. Rourke blinked against the light, heart pounding. The jungle shook with thunderous impacts, explosions, gunfire, something far larger moving between them. The air filled with the metallic tang of ozone and burning fuel. Cale watched the sky, growling softly, eyes reflecting bursts of fire high above. Rourke turned toward the sound of battle, forcing his brain into motion. "They'll kill it," he said. "Or worse, capture it." He looked down at Cale, then back at the distant flashes. "We can't let that happen." He sprinted through the undergrowth, Cale close behind. Branches whipped at his armor, the ground shaking with each distant detonation. Above, a Syndicate gunship descended, plasma cannons spinning. Rourke dove into a ravine as a barrage seared the trees, molten sap raining down around them. He activated his wrist display. A distorted transmission flickered to life. Syndicate command frequencies scrambled but still recognizable. Target confirmed. Apex specimen located. Secondary life form, human, designated expendable. Rourke's jaw clenched. Expendable. Always the same story. He switched channels and spoke aloud, voice steady but laced with venom. "This is Captain Rourke Hale. You're trespassing on a quarantine world. Pull your ships or I'll mark every one of you for mutiny in the Galactic Court." Static. Then laughter. "You don't have that kind of authority anymore, Captain. Orders are clear. Retrieve the specimen. Kill anything else that moves." The line went dead. Cale snarled, sensing Rourke's anger. "Yeah," Rourke muttered, gripping his rifle, They always say that before things go bad. The treeline ahead erupted in light. The adult Dravicthar crashed through a gunship midair, tearing through its engines before hurling the wreckage into the canopy. Metal screamed as debris fell, igniting the forest floor. The beast hit the ground hard, wings folding, claws buried in shattered steel. It roared again, defiance echoing across the valley. Rourke and Cale reached the clearing just as syndicate troops poured from the smoke, armored figures, pulse rifles trained forward. Rourke ducked behind a fallen trunk, returning fire in short bursts. The Dravicthar ripped through their formation like a storm-given flesh. Each swing of its claws sent shockwaves across the earth. Yet even fury had limits. Plasma bolts struck its wounded flank, one after another. The creature stumbled, bellowing in pain. Rourke felt the sound vibrate in his ribs. He moved before thinking, sprinting into open ground, firing at the gunners with precision born of old wars. "Get away from it," he shouted, voice raw. "You want a fight, come for me." Cale lunged beside him, claws flashing, tearing through armor like paper. Soldiers screamed, then went silent. Rourke dropped another with a headshot, spun, and dove behind the Dravicthar's wing for cover. The creature turned its gaze on him again, bleeding, shaking, alive. Rourke met its eyes. "We end this together," he said. Something in the Dravicthar's expression changed, a grim understanding between predators. It reared back, chest expanding, spines along its back lighting with electric fire. Rourke shielded his face as the beast released a concussive blast of energy, vaporizing the remaining soldiers and leveling the nearest gunship. When the light faded, the jungle smoldered. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of burning leaves. Rourke dropped to one knee, lungs burning. Cale circled his parent, whining softly. The great predator's sides heaved with each breath, glowing veins dimming slowly. Rourke looked up at the ruin of the battlefield. "They'll send more," he said quietly. "They always do." The Dravicthar lowered its head again, close enough for him to see his reflection in its molten eyes. Then, in a deep, resonant tone that trembled through the ground, it spoke, not in human words, but in something his mind translated all the same. "We stand together." Rourke nodded once, gripping his rifle, the firelight painting him in gold and ash. "Then let's show them what that means." The creature's wings unfurled, stretching wide enough to block the dawn. In the distance, engines thundered again. Rourke turned toward the horizon, where new shadows were descending through the clouds. He felt the weight of inevitability settle on his shoulders, but beneath it, a strange calm. Whatever came next, he wasn't alone. And as the jungle trembled beneath the promise of another storm, the man and the predators prepared for war. The forest was alive with tension. Every leaf, every shadow, seemed to pulse in rhythm with Rourke's heartbeat. He crouched behind a shattered tree trunk, Cale at his side, tail twitching like a living metronome. Above them, the adult Dravicthar, Varric as Rourke had begun calling him, hovered silently, wings folded, eyes glinting with predatory intelligence. The syndicate forces weren't waiting. They were already closing in, boots pounding, scanners buzzing. Rourke checked his gear, counting every charge and bullet. It was a small arsenal against an army, but he had something they didn't: Cale and Varric. Two apex predators loyal to him alone. He touched Cale's scaled flank. "Ready?" The cub gave a low growl, claws scraping the mud. Rourke smirked despite the tension. "Good. That's the spirit." He had spent days mapping the terrain, setting traps from scavenged tech and twisted jungle roots. Razor vines rigged to spin and slash, camouflaged pits with reinforced netting, plasma mines wired to triggers he'd scavenged from destroyed dropships. Every step, every trap was a gamble, but human ingenuity had never failed him. At least not entirely. The first wave hit as the sun struggled through thick clouds. Pulse rifles flared, lighting the jungle like artificial lightning. Mercenaries ran in formation, armored and disciplined, certain of victory. They weren't prepared for what came next. Varric lunged from the shadows, claws slashing through the first squad. Soldiers screamed as limbs were torn apart, their weapons spinning uselessly in the mud. Plasma bolts ricocheted off his scales, sparks showering the undergrowth, but the beast moved with terrifying precision. Cale darted in, teeth bared, ripping through armor and scattering the rest like startled birds. Rourke ran alongside them, firing short controlled bursts. He ducked beneath a swing from a squad leader wielding an energy glaive, kicked a leg into the man's chest, sending him tumbling into a razor vine trap. The jungle was chaos incarnate, but Rourke's mind worked like clockwork. He moved, calculated, improvised, human instincts sharpening under pressure. Varric roared, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The sound was more than a warning, it was a declaration. The soldiers faltered, some dropping their weapons in awe, others trying to retreat. Rourke didn't allow hesitation. He rolled forward, planting a plasma mine directly beneath an advancing mech. When he detonated it, molten metal rained down, sending the vehicle crashing into the jungle floor. Kale hissed, darting between the shadows, snapping at anyone foolish enough to chase him. The cub was no longer defenseless. Muscle and claw, instinct sharpened by survival and human guidance, he was an extension of the war machine Rourke had become. The second wave was worse. Heavier armor, coordinated fire patterns, tactical drones scanning the treeline. Rourke ducked behind a fallen tree, heart racing. "Varric," he shouted. "Up." The great predator surged skyward, wings unfurling, kicking up a storm of mud and leaves. Plasma arcs danced along his scales as he collided with two dropships, tearing them apart midair. Rourke felt the rush of exhilaration mixed with fear. He had lived through countless battles, but nothing had ever made his blood sing like this, surrounded by destruction, yet alive, moving with two beings who trusted him without question. He grinned, firing at advancing mercenaries, luring them into traps that erupted with fire and shrapnel. But even apex predators have limits. Varric took a plasma strike to his flank, staggering. Kale hissed in panic, circling ready to defend. Rourke dashed forward, bullets humming past his helmet, and pressed a med patch against the wound. It hissed and burned, and the beast roared, shaking him with the sheer force of its fury. Rourke gritted his teeth. "Hold still, big guy. Don't die on me now." The remaining syndicate forces regrouped, realizing brute force was failing. They called in orbital strikes, targeting the treeline, shaking the earth with each explosion. Trees toppled, mud slid like rivers, and debris rained from above. Rourke rolled with the impacts, shielding Kale as best he could. Varric recovered, eyes blazing. He moved with precision, slashing through reinforcements, tearing vehicles apart, wings blurring in motion. Every strike was calculated, a partnership with the human who had saved his cub. Rourke noticed it, how the predator waited for his signals, how Kale mirrored his movements. They were no longer separate forces. They were one entity of destruction, human and alien entwined in perfect coordination. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed in a blur of fire, metal and roars. By the time silence began to creep back into the jungle, the syndicate soldiers were gone, either dead or fleeing. The devastation was total. Shattered trees, smoldering vehicles and scorched earth marked the battlefield. Rourke lowered his rifle, chest heaving, and looked around. Kale padded to his side, tail brushing his leg, eyes still gleaming with adrenaline. Varric landed heavily a few meters away, wings folding with a hiss of displaced air. His chest heaved, blood still visible on his flank. He lowered his massive head until his molten eyes met Rourke's. The understanding between them was unspoken but absolute. They had survived, and they had done it together. Rourke wiped soot and blood from his armor. "They'll be back," he said softly, almost to himself. "You know that, right?" Kale huffed in agreement, brushing against his leg. The great predator made a low rumble in response, a sound that carried respect and warning both. Even in victory, Rourke felt the weight of inevitability. The syndicate would regroup, bring more firepower, more soldiers, more machines. But now he had something they could never predict: loyalty. Kale's intelligence and instinct, Varric's power and cunning, and his own human unpredictability. Together they were not just survivors, they were a force the galaxy could not ignore. He took a deep breath, scanning the horizon. The jungle smoked, the fires burning themselves out, yet in the heart of the chaos they stood unbroken. "We did it," he murmured, not as a boast but as an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed in blood and fire. Kale curled against his leg, a soft rumble vibrating the ground, and Varric's glowing veins pulsed in the dim light. Rourke's gaze hardened. "They'll come again," he said. "But this time we'll be ready. And next time, we fight to win." The predators looked to him, their loyalty absolute. Rourke nodded once, a silent promise to his companions and to the world watching them from the treetops. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And somewhere deep in the smoke and shadows, new threats stirred, sensing the disturbance. Rourke tightened his grip on his rifle, muscles coiled, ready to lead the charge once more. The battle was over, but the war, the one that would test the limits of human ingenuity and the ferocity of predators alike, was only just beginning. Dawn broke over Vornis, 9 in streaks of molten gold and violet, burning through the lingering smoke of battle. Rourke Hale sat against a fractured boulder, armor scorched, muscles tight from days of running, fighting, surviving. His breath came in measured bursts, each one a reminder that he was still alive, still human, and still in command of a force no army could hope to match. Cale lay curled at his side, larger now than when he had first rescued him, scales gleaming with health and vigor, eyes glowing faintly in the new light. Across the clearing Varric, the apex predator, stretched his immense wings, each flap stirring the ash and fallen leaves around them. Rourke studied the creature, noting the deep gash along its flank that had almost ended him in the last battle. Despite the injury, Varric's posture was proud, his chest rising and falling like the pulse of a storm. There was a quiet dignity in him, a sense that the universe had entrusted Rourke with something sacred, something ancient. And Rourke felt it too, a responsibility that went beyond survival, beyond duty, beyond loyalty. He had saved a life, and that life had returned in power and purpose. Cale stirred, rising to his feet, tail flicking in anticipation. Rourke reached down, pressing a hand against the cub's scales. "We've got work to do," he murmured, voice rough but steady. "The syndicate isn't done yet. They never are." Cale responded with a low rumble, a sound that was equal parts warning and promise, a bond forged in blood and fire now unbreakable. Rourke moved through the clearing, assessing the battlefield. The syndicate had left in retreat, their forces shattered, but he knew they would return with reinforcements, more advanced weaponry, and a strategy designed to exploit any weakness. He felt a twinge of apprehension, the kind that always lurked in the chest of someone who had seen too many wars, but he suppressed it. Humans survived because they adapted. They thrived because they refused to surrender. And now he had two beings who embodied that same relentless will. Varric approached, lowering his massive head until his molten eyes met Rourke's. The intensity in that gaze was humbling but also affirming. Rourke knelt slightly, acknowledging the predator's respect without fear. This wasn't just an apex predator, they were allies, partners in survival, bonded by choice and necessity. The thought struck him sharply. A human could be fragile, but humanity's greatest strength lay in what it protected. And right now he protected Cale, and Cale had the strength of an entire species at his back. They retreated to the old ruins, choosing higher ground where Varric could observe the horizon. Cale could move freely and Rourke could plan. The cave system beneath the cliffs offered concealment and a vantage point, and he began to prepare. He scavenged what supplies remained, rigging traps and fortifying positions with an instinct honed by decades of combat. Every rope, every wire, every mine was deliberate. Every motion was calculated. Every heartbeat was a countdown to the inevitable return of their hunters. As night fell, the trio stood in the fading light, silhouettes against the dying sun. The air was charged, thick with anticipation. Rourke crouched beside Cale, glancing at Varric. "You know they'll come," he said, voice quiet. "They'll try to take you, kid. And if they can't, they'll try to take me." Cale shifted closer, nuzzling Rourke's armor as though affirming his place beside him. Then the first signals appeared, a shimmer across the horizon as distant dropships descended, engines screaming and lights cutting through the darkness. Rourke rose, rifle ready, muscles tense. Cale moved beside him, claws scraping the rock in anticipation. Varric stepped forward, wings half raised, teeth bared, and a deep rumble vibrating through the earth itself. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The first wave struck with a fury born of industrial discipline. Soldiers poured into the clearing, armored and relentless. Rourke fired with precision, taking down those who broke cover, while Cale darted through shadows, tearing through anything foolish enough to charge. Varric's roar shattered the night, wings unfolding to create a storm of wind and fear, as claws and spines tore through machinery and men alike. The battle was chaos incarnate, but it was also art. Human ingenuity met alien fury. Every step, every swing, every shot was calculated, anticipating the next. Rourke ducked beneath a plasma blast, rolled toward a fallen tree, and detonated a mine just as Cale barreled into an advancing squad. The explosion sent men flying, armor and flesh shredded, and the echo of it shook the jungle like distant thunder. Varric, despite his injury, moved with terrifying precision. Plasma arcs coursed along his scales as he struck down a dropship midair, sending fire raining into the forest below. Rourke's pulse surged as he fired on approaching soldiers, dodging and weaving, guiding his companions with hand signals and shouted commands. Cale mirrored every motion, instincts tuned to Rourke's intentions, becoming an extension of human cunning fused with natural ferocity. Minutes, or hours, passed in a blur. The forest was scarred with fire and blood. The remaining syndicate forces faltered, panic replacing discipline. Rourke felt a moment of grim satisfaction. He had survived countless battles, but nothing had ever felt as complete as this. Human and predator fighting not as master and subordinate, but as equals, a triad of survival and vengeance. Finally the last soldier fell, dragged into the shadows by Cale's jaws. The clearing was silent but for the crackle of fire and the rasping breaths of the trio. Rourke lowered his rifle, muscles trembling from exhaustion and exhilaration. Varric's molten eyes met his once more, and in that gaze Rourke understood everything. Respect, loyalty, and a bond forged in blood stronger than any chain. He knelt beside Cale, brushing ash from the cub's scales. "We did it," he whispered, voice low but firm. "Together." Cale leaned into him, purring, a low, resonant vibration that carried the weight of their shared survival. Varric moved closer, pressing his massive head to Rourke's shoulder, the warmth of life and trust radiating in waves. The victory was not without consequence. The jungle bore scars, the earth burned, and the syndicate would regroup. But Rourke felt no fear. He had proven that humanity was unpredictable, relentless, and capable of forging alliances no one could anticipate. He had saved a life, and in doing so, had gained guardians that no army could overcome. Rourke stood, chest heaving, looking over the horizon where the first light of dawn reflected off scorched leaves. "We survive," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and we protect what matters." Cale growled softly, tail flicking, and Varric rumbled beneath the sound of the awakening jungle, wings unfurling in readiness. For the first time in years Rourke smiled, not at victory, not at survival, but at what they had become together. Humans, predators, allies. A force beyond calculation, beyond fear, beyond the rules of any army. From the treetops, distant figures moved, remnants of the syndicate still watching, still scheming. But Rourke was no longer alone. With Cale and Varric by his side he could face any threat. The jungle trembled beneath their presence, a warning to anyone who dared approach. He raised his head, eyes glinting with resolve. "Let them come," he said, voice carrying across the valley. "They'll find no human to break, no predator to tame, and no force they can outmatch." The wind shifted, carrying the scents of earth, fire, and scales. Cale chirped in acknowledgement. Varric rumbled, wings stretching wide as if to embrace the dawn. Rourke felt it, the bond, the power, the unshakable certainty that they were more than survivors. They were guardians. And in that moment, as the sun rose over the scars of the battlefield, man and predators stood together, unbroken, untamed, and ready to face whatever the galaxy dared throw at them next. The war was far from over, but for the first time Rourke knew the outcome didn't depend on strength alone. It depended on loyalty, cunning, and the unyielding will of humanity. He smiled again, more fiercely this time, feeling the pulse of life and fury around him. "Let's show them why they should never underestimate a human," he whispered. Cale growled in agreement. Varric's roar echoed through the valley, a sound that would haunt the stars themselves. And together they stepped into the dawn, guardians of a new era, unstoppable, unbreakable, and utterly human.